Max Whitehead is going to be with us in a moment or two. So if we vote to legalise cannabis next year, will you be free to smoke it and eat it, get a little relaxed and under the influence of it, and then go to work and not suffer any consequences? Because what you're doing would now be completely legal. So Max Whitehead joins us now. Morning, Max. It seems that if we legalise cannabis, we're going to have an employment law minefield, aren't we?
We certainly are. This is just adding more burden to the employers. The question is, how far does the employers go? And I think it's going to be pretty obvious what's going to happen here. I would suggest that the first time there's an accident, and of course WorkSafe rush in, the first thing they do is breath test, drug test any poor person or any person who may have caused the accident. And if they discover that they're drug impaired, who's going to be held accountable? Well, certainly that individual, but so is the employer. Now, it won't be long. I think it'll be compulsory for employers to drug test regularly and to keep it up on a constant basis, because if they don't, and a worker comes to work and actually kills someone or injures a colleague, then the employer's failed in their care of duty to ensure the place is safe. So I would think anyone out there who participates in probably cannabis, because I believe it stays in your system for a while, you're going to have a lot of trouble if you're actually caught at work with one of these drug tests.
But wouldn't the law, Max, be the same as we have now regarding alcohol in your system? I mean, if you have a heavy night on the Terps, heavy morning on the Terps, you go to work at your normal start time, you're operating machinery, and you are still under the influence because of what you've been up to the night before, wouldn't the same law apply in cannabis as it does at the moment with alcohol?
Yes, it does, exactly. So what happens, an employer has not only a right to set the standards in the workplace, but an obligation in health and safety to ensure the place is safe. So he or she has the right to say, okay, zero tolerance when it comes to drugs, zero tolerance when it comes to alcohol. If you come to work under the influence of either of those, it's a dismissible offence. And they practice it. It's been going on, obviously, for the alcohol for a long, long time, and drugs was less tolerated. Probably going to have to be, I'm going to say it, it'll never be tolerated in the workplace, and anyone under the influence would be probably facing potential dismissal. I don't think it'll be warning situations. It'll be, you've put your colleagues at risk, we can't afford to have you here, you've got to go. And of course that can be very, very difficult for an employee who perhaps wasn't aware. Maybe they had a bag of lollies, which is full of it. And some people think that's funny to subject individuals to it, and then they potentially could lose their job.
Are drug and alcohol policies commonplace in employment contracts these days? In other words, before you start a job, you sign something which suggests that you will abide by the company's drug and alcohol policy, which in the case of a company operating heavy machinery is almost certainly going to say complete abstinence or complete absence of it.
Yeah, Peter, any employment expert who's out there would be advising all employers to have a policy. And the reason is this: they have no rights to drug test any individual unless there is a policy. So the courts have dealt with this already, and they said that employer, you can't randomly conduct a drug test unless you've got a policy saying so. So you'll find any reasonable size employer will have that. The small employers, they probably don't, and wing it on the day. But this change of law, and if there are regular users out there and the employer knows it, he's got to protect himself or herself against prosecution, because they WorkSafe are going to make them responsible. The difficulty with WorkSafe is that they don't police these things. So I'm aware how WorkSafe are aware of very unsafe workplaces, and they don't do anything about it. But as soon as someone gets injured or killed, they go in like Superman and then crucify that employer and bring them to their knees, and quite often just ruin the whole business as well. So small employers are going to fall into a bit of a trap here if they get caught.
And they, of course, have to pay for the likes of the Drug Detection Agency to come through the business, don't they, to conduct regular tests? And they pay quite a lot too.
Yeah, they do pay a lot. And because if you want a credible test, there are plenty of people out there offering services of drug testing, and they're contestable. Like an employee who's been caught or dismissed for being under the influence of drugs due to a drug test has been found them out, they could challenge that drug test and regularly do, and successful in saying the test itself was not up to a reasonable standard, therefore the employee should not be held accountable for that drug test. So the employer, to do it properly, should be paying a significant amount of money to get a credible drug test. And it's more cost to any employer. Life's getting tough for employers right now. The new laws coming out are just really just ripping money out of their pockets all the time at the moment.
Yeah, we're going to be talking to Kirk Hardy, the founder of the Drug Detection Agency, after 10 o'clock about this issue. But in general, Max, how much do you understand it costs for an employer per employee to pay for the services of somebody like the DDA to come and do proper tests?
Well, I actually I can't answer that, but you've got the right man.
Yeah.
And this is a bit of a probably a stretch for Kirk, but he'll enjoy this. But his business runs very high quality drug testing, and that's a credible one that I would recommend they use. So he'd be the right man to ask for that, Peter. And there you could feel the burden that'll be coming upon it. Now, the question that comes to this, though, is how much is an employer to be held responsible for a foolish employee? And the courts will be examining that closely, and have already. They are. So employers today have to treat their employees as if they're complete idiots, put rails around them, make sure that they don't step offside, make sure that they don't accidentally come to work impaired with drugs. And if they don't do that, the courts are holding them as being responsible. And that's pretty hard for any employer at the moment, and that's why they're going to have to take all these precautions. Kirk's his business will probably, he'll be heading for a multi-million-dollar bloody boost in business, I would suspect.
Yeah, and probably working extra hard to get as many franchises up and running as he possibly can, because essentially it's sort of a provincial-based one at the moment, isn't it, with one in each significantly sized town. Max, it appears as if the adoption of this legislation, which we know is just in the draft stage, but if it's passed in the referendum, if the public of New Zealand wants to do this by a majority, it seems as if there's going to be all sorts of consequences, because we're being well forewarned about them, but there's going to be an awful lot of consequences in areas that maybe the politicians hadn't thought about.
Yeah, it's very good for Peter. You and I are about the same age, but I reflect back on my days and enjoying my alcohol, my teens, and over-consuming, and I thought that was the most magic substance in the world. But now I look at it and say, why in the world do we as human beings need artificial stimulus? I mean, there's so much joy in life anyway without it, and you can get high on just actually walking around the place and chatting to people and going and, seeing nature in itself. But why do we need this artificial stimulus? I mean, I enjoy my drink, and I'd be pretty peeved off if they made it illegal, but could I do without it? Yeah, I possibly can. So why do we need to have, substances like marijuana? And, that people smoke it, and that's what the government are talking about, actually banning smoking. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that we're actually introducing more and more into our society where people can live a false life. They live in a cloud of drug-enhanced bloody impairments, and to me, it's just not correct.
Well, those are questions, Max, that I can't answer. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I thank you for putting them out there.
Stimulate some discussion with the listeners out there. They might have a different view to Max Whitehead, but I would welcome it too, because I think it's worthy of a good discussion. And if I'm wrong, I'm prepared to listen to these people.
Yeah, good stuff, Max. As always, appreciate your expertise. Employment law specialist Max Whitehead here on Magic Talk.